Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 1st, 2024 meeting of the Planning Board. As you all may note, we are remote tonight due to a scheduling issue. So thank you all for being flexible. I'll begin tonight's meeting with a roll call vote, just in the order that I see. I think it's a roll call vote, right? We haven't done this in a while. So I will go forward. Mark Giddings,
Here.
Sue Felshen,
Here.
Linda Miller,
Muted, Linda.
I'm here. Can you
Yep.
hear me?
Thanks. Yep. Pat Nelson. Did you say here? I can't.
I did.
Oh,
I
yeah,
said here.
here. Great.
Yep.
And then Abby Flanagan. Sorry, we just need to all say we're here.
Here.
And I, Andrew Boardman, am also here. So with that, we will move to our agenda for the evening. The first item is, well, all we have tonight actually is administrative business. So the first thing will just be public comment. These are comments that are limited to items that are not on the agenda this evening. Public comment is limited to up to 15 minutes with no more than 3 minutes allocated to any one speaker. Do we have any public comment? Awesome. With that, we will move on to the second administrative item, which is the MBTA Community Zoning Overlay Scenario Amendments. So I'll turn it over to Elizabeth.
Great, thank you. As the board discussed at your last meeting, a process for moving forward to look to see about addressing the one comment from HLC on the single contiguous district. Their comment that the requirement is one district has to be at least 50% of the total land area. So moving forward, what I thought for tonight, I had our GIS analyst run 3 different scenarios, and I'll run through, actually it's 3, almost like 1, 2, maybe 6, but I'm going to run through them more as an informational process, saying, here's one scenario, and this is the GIS model, compliance model outcome. So you can kind of see how moving, or adding one thing or deleting another thing changes one parameter. So we're in compliance one way, but you may not be in compliance another way. So ultimately there's, 3 items for compliance. We have our unit capacity requirement, which is 1,093, 93, 94. So now I'm already 94. Thank you. When we have a district compliance, which is 50% of the district has to be within the half-mile radius of the commuter rail stations. And then we have this new requirement that says, there has to be a single contiguous district that's 50% of the total land area. So I'm going to share my screen and start with the first option. So this scenario adds 1, 2, 3, 4 additional lots to subdistrict 4, which is Baker Ave, and everything else stays the same. And I'll zoom in and let me know if everybody can see this. Okay.
Yeah.
So it just added one lot here, a lot here, and then these 2 lots. This would be Trashology. This is the vet. This is the other office building. I think there's 2 buildings on the lot before you go across the commuter rail train station. And this is one of the medical buildings. Everything else stayed the same. So with this scenario, we're compliant with the station area, station area at 58%. The total acreage is 95.3 acres. But just adding this, the contiguous acreage is only at 42.81%. So we're not compliant in that way. So, it may be, maybe able to add, a couple of more parcels to get the contiguous acreage higher. But then and also in this scenario, bless you, the unit capacity is a little bit over, by 100, a little over 100 units. So we have the unit capacity with this model, but not the contiguous acreage. So there may be ways to tweak this option without, doing anything else to the other 4 districts. But again, it would just be, adding something here and there, or taking something out and adding something different, and just keep running that model. So that's one.
So Elizabeth, can I ask a
Yep.
question?
Sure.
If you tweak this and you add some more parcels, but it's already meeting the number of units that you need to have, would you not be adding units?
So you could still, yeah, you may be adding additional units. But so right now, this option is not compliant because it doesn't meet the 50% single contiguous district. So this option is approximately 95.3 acres. So half of that, you'd have to be at 47 and change, 47 something acres. And this is only at 42.81.
I guess maybe I'm not asking this right, or I'm
Okay.
not understanding this. So I'm assuming that one of the things that people might be concerned about, and I heard a lot of talk about adding more traffic, more people, more into West Concord. But when you talk about acres and percentage of acres, what does that do to the actual number of people's cars?
It doesn't do anything because this is just zoning. There's no requirement to build, there's no requirement to construct any units.
Okay,
So yeah, it's just zoning. So what the compliance model does is basically assumes that there's nothing on these lots, and if somebody were to come in and based on the new zoning and the dimensional requirements and the setback requirements and the location of floodplains and wetlands and height restrictions, what would be the modeled unit capacity if somebody just came in and just did all multifamily. So, currently that unit capacity for this scenario is roughly 1,205 units. And we need a unit capacity of at least 1,094. So this this current configuration meets the unit capacity requirement. It meets the 50% station area requirement because we actually have, 3 sub-districts within the transit station area, but it doesn't meet the single contiguous district requirement. Because this
Okay, thanks.
totals, okay. All right, so I actually think I need to stop sharing to go to the next one. And then just to kind of give you an idea of how, how tweaking works is, so this is that same scenario, but deleting Sub-District 2, which is Concord Oil, Concord Lumber, and those three residences next to Concord Oil. So again, this is also not compliant. And again, because the single contiguous district area is not sufficient. This model has roughly 89.54 total acres. 61% is now within the station area because you took out Sub-District 2, which is outside of the station area. So your percentage within the station area went up. But again, this is only 42.81 acres in a single contiguous district.
But we no longer need as much of it to be contiguous because only half of it has to be contiguous?
So this total area on this is 89.54.
Oh, and 42
acres.
is
So
not
you need
quite half,
40
yes.
You need 44.77 acres, and this is only 42.81. So you'd have to roughly add 3 more acres approximately to be over the 50% contiguous. So I mean, it's not a lot. But again, this just kind of shows you how how really we're talking, minor shifts are changing. So this model right here, the actual unit capacity model goes up. You're now at 1,255 units. So this one went up, but you still don't meet the single contiguous district requirement.
Wait a second, how can this one have a higher unit capacity when it didn't change anything except removing some area?
Because removing the area reduces the acreage, and the area that you remove,
Which changes the
Sub-District
unit
2,
capacity. Yeah.
is mostly floodplain.
Hmm.
So the unit capacity for this is not,
Hmm.
is not a lot. It's not that many units.
It really points out a flaw in how the state law was written, that by
Wow.
removing the
Yes.
number of units can put us into compliance because of this 50% requirement. They should tweak the state law. I know, but then they'd have to get people to agree.
Elizabeth, I have a question on
Sure.
that one, and that would be, we have passed, the town meeting has passed that zoning.
Mhm.
So how would you remove a property from the overlay district that now exists in the Attorney General has approved, but EOHLC says it's not compliant. So I'm not quite sure how you.
It's still all of it is still at the core of all of this. This is still a zoning bylaw amendment. This is still just zoning, regardless of the process of going through, HLC. This is still zoning. So the town, every year changes the zoning map one way or the other. So it would just be changing this map at town meeting.
Right.
Although
but
if somebody slipped in and put in a proposal to a place which is currently part of it, and then we removed it next year, they would still be allowed to proceed because it's part of the district right now.
Yes.
Yes,
Technically,
although
yes.
that seems unlikely that somebody will get it in. We'll put in a proposal on an area that we might remove that quickly.
I'm not even gonna start
Speculating, yes.
speculating on that one. What was your question, Linda?
no, it was just, it seems, that it's somewhat unfair to the property owners that you change it one year and change it back the next year. But, I mean, it is what it is, and I'm sure they would be given adequate notification, so that's, yeah, okay. But
So
you,
for whatever scenario, I think what the board discussed was coming up with, maybe, 2 or 3 different options. And then, specifically having, a public forum in January to get feedback. And just as we did the first time around, those property owners who would be affected one way or the other would be notified.
okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so the next one, to kind of give you another idea, this one doesn't change any of the other districts, but adds, this is the office building again, and then, something larger, like, Concord Green, which also has some floodplain on it, but not as much as other areas. So this district, excuse me, this district is, I believe, is compliant. The contiguous acreage is 54.48. And the total acreage is 114.26. 58% is within the station area. And so this would be, an example of, a compliant district.
What's the capacity on this one, Elizabeth?
So the unit capacity for this one is roughly 1,429.
What is the definition of contiguous? I wonder, because Concord Green is catty corner from the Novo Riverside property, and I remain concerned about adding more commercial area to the overlay district because it could undercut our commercial tax base. If we removed that added commercial property, the triangular one, that's between those two,
yeah,
do we count or not?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look at the compliance guidelines.
And
but
it,
I-
Do other touch and counts, yeah.
and it's contiguous even though isn't it separated by the rail line?
Yeah, roads and rail lines, are allowed to have properties be contiguous. Okay. And moving on, he ran this same scenario with, again, removing sub-district 2, and the unit capacity goes down slightly, but everything else, it still remains contiguous. And then the last one.
Are you, okay.
Oh, no, go ahead.
You weren't sharing something just then, did you
No,
mean to
I
be?
wasn't.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
It's all it was the same map, it just sub-district 2 was removed. So and then the last one.
Oh, hello, Rob. Should we note that
Yes.
Rob has joined us?
And then so the last one, just to kind of give you an idea, because there's a lot of the conversation was trying to keep the area within the 2 train stations, trying to stay even. But again, so this keeps sub-district 1, 2, 4, and 5 the same, but just looking at sub-district 3, which is the Thoreau Depot, it becomes even more challenging because, you know, the lots are smaller, and to be able to add enough area to get a single contiguous district. So this example right here, so this right here is where Crosby's Market is. So this would be CVS, and then the three little commercial buildings along Sudbury Road. So adding those. This is not compliant. And in fact, this scenario, the unit capacity, you know, it doesn't go up significantly. Again, we're short on acreage and short on the single contiguous district, which the largest single contiguous district would be District 4, which is the Baker Avenue area, which is 31.55. And the total acreage for here is 87.87. So, we need a district that's 43.94 acres, and the largest district is only 31.55. So that just kind of gives everybody an idea of, you know, this really is, you know, a small push and a small tug, and it's just, you know, running the models, and so at this point, I'd probably just like to get board members' feedback on, you know, what scenarios you think we should be running or, you know, looking into, and I can present kind of the same thing, you know, for your next meeting for you to talk about. And then if you need the GIS analyst to come and go over anything, you know, he can come on the 12th, or you can just keep refining and asking questions until you come up with things you want to move forward with.
All right, I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say I'm super confused, but you guys have been steeped in this and I haven't. We saw 3 scenarios, 2 were not compliant and 1 was compliant. So I don't understand why we would be looking at any scenarios that are not compliant, or how we
Oh,
put that into the mix of what we.
no, I'm not suggesting you look at not non-compliant scenarios. I just gave you a couple of examples of, you know, how, you know, you add certain things and you think it's like, okay, you know, this has to be enough, this has to work.
Okay.
And you find out one of those 3 requirements isn't, it's not hitting the mark on one of the 3. So, you know, I just provided you examples of, you know, different things.
Yeah, I actually find that helpful. It gives me a better idea of, you know, what doesn't work to steer us toward what we're stuck with. I mean, it's a really hard problem that if we have to keep half of the area contiguous, it's just flatly impossible to have anything like parity between the two parts of Concord, and that's something really important to the town. The state law is making it impossible. Yeah.
It's not impossible. It's, you know, it's challenging. It's an exercise, but I don't think it's impossible.
Well, it's not impossible, but other changes I can think of would have other serious problems. I can't help but wonder, I mean, given that we have voted in a good faith effort to be compliant, and given that HLC is just so behind that they're not going to review us for months to come, maybe not until next summer for all we know.
I'm 90% sure that they won't even look at I mean, I will be submitting for our district compliance application by the end of the year. And, you know, and I've sent a couple of emails to HLC staff trying to meet with them so we can go over the 8 comments and make sure we're addressing everything. And, this is, inform them, this is what the board is working on. The warrant doesn't close till February 19th, but this is, what they're working on and the conversations they're having in the community, and they are going to put us in the in review status. A month ago, there were, over 50 communities from last year's round, the bus transit communities still in status review, for 9 months. So I'm confident that they're not going to review us till after June.
Well, it makes me wonder whether we should take a partial risk and wait until they come back with their actual review. Now, I say a partial risk in the sense that I think we have to plan for them to come back and say, no, when we said 50%, we really meant 50% and we don't care and we're flunking your plan. We need to have gone through all of the effort to come up with a compliant plan. But I wonder if rather than putting something on the warrant, we should take a risk and have a special town meeting if we need to. Although we could also put something on the warrant and then choose not to move it if HLC says something in advance, or if we decide to take the risk. This is kind of a non-answer because in my opinion, we have to move forward with designing something that's compliant with state law. So we'll have to do all the work regardless. I'm just throwing that out there of, if it's going to take them that long to give us a straight answer, do we really want to mess up our reasonable level of parity between two sides of town, between 2 train stations, when they might say, oh, it's okay because you have 2 train stations?
It does, along that, it does kind of feel like we're arguing against ourselves in the sense of they've given an interpretation which isn't necessarily supported by the law itself. And then we're sort of jumping to it and coming up with something new based on that. And it's a question of, do we wait for more definitive guidance because all we've gotten is preliminary feedback? Like, is it worth jumping through another hoop? Understanding that this is probably a good exercise anyway, but until we're given something definitive, is that enough to go back to town and say we need to change it?
Because we don't even know if we need to change it. We just know that we might need to change it. Yeah.
And is that enough to get the level of public engagement that's appropriate for this? It's a question, especially where we're looking at rezoning areas that really weren't, I recall a lot of the public comment when we did it was we were rezoning where people lived right now. And we were, it wasn't us changing, there was little public comment about changing Concord Oil. There was little public comment about changing the sort of the commercial, more commercially, like whatever areas. but when we were changing, I forget what those are called down on Thoreau Street, Thoreau Gardens maybe. The neighbors had a lot of concerns because you're rezoning my house and throwing Concord Green into this discussion, which seems like a reasonable, the density is comparable to what we're talking about. It's not actually, it's just becoming a by right thing instead of a garden apartment development, which it was back in the day. That may make people nervous, and that's what, without clear guidance that says this will meet state standards, are we gonna have to come back and bite at this apple again without more? And I'm nervous about it. That said, I think it is a good exercise.
There's also some question about how this whole thing is going to shake out. As you know, it's, lots of people are fighting this. I think we're better off to wait a little bit. I think we should look at the exercise as Elizabeth has showed us, okay, and at least understand what the ramifications are. But I'm not so sure that we need to bring it before the town at this point in time. My opinion. I think we'll catch a lot of flack over this.
Elizabeth, I don't remember the exact map, but could you run scenarios looking at the MCI property as well?
That's another point, that if we hold off a year, maybe we'll be rezoning it, at which point it would be acceptable to include.
I think
Well,
people
I-
will just have the question. And so I think we need to have an understanding of how that might influence it. I don't know that we'll be anywhere near rezoning or not at that time period, but I do believe that people should at least know would that put us into compliance easily. 'Cause
I'd be happy to have him run that. I mean, previously, we could not include MCI Concord, but
And we still can't, because it's still owned by the state, but
no,
I concur that we should check.
I would probably disagree with that, because there's legislative, action, by the governor, and a process that's already starting to dispose of the property. So I think that the state would allow us to include it.
Well, that makes it right there. I mean, obviously that's, the whole property there is 51 acres. I don't know how much the wastewater treatment facility is, but that would certainly get us into the 50% land mass.
Of course, it blows the parity between two sides of Concord Park, but that's a necessary feature of 50 contiguous acres. So, I mean, 50% contiguous.
I'll have him run it.
Thank you.
Any other scenarios you want run for now, or, I mean, I'll have them look at, I'll look at Sue's question about
Does
not
catty
having the
corner
commercial,
count? Yeah.
and whether that's considered contiguous or not under the guidelines. I can have him run, including MCI Concord. I can, and then provide that for your next meeting.
Actually, I have another question, which is, if we could include MCI Concord, could we remove any parts of Baker Ave and Baker Ave Extension, not the Novo Riverside property, but other commercial properties, in order to rezone less commercial property in order to maintain our commercial tax base better? I don't know. I'm just curious. I don't think there was very much included, but wasn't there one or two properties on?
No, there's Junction Village, Concord Park Assisted Living, and then the Novo project.
Oh, and it's nothing else. That's it. Okay, then no, it wouldn't make a difference. Never mind.
When
You
you
think
bring
I'd
this,
have it?
when you bring this to us again, Elizabeth, would you make sure that you have plenty of aspirin in the room, please?
But I will also.
You can get a headache pretty quick on this stuff.
Or
Okay.
bourbon.
Yeah, so I will put the offer out to anybody, especially, with Pat's comment, just, you want to just come in and for coffee and half an hour, we can kind of do just the MBTA Communities 101 and just answer basic general questions and bring you up to speed.
I'm more than happy to do that. I
Okay.
can't imagine I'll figure it out in a half hour with you, Elizabeth, but I'll give it a shot.
Okay. That's a good plan. I will move forward with that. Do you want to see if there's any public comment, Andrew?
Sure, I will open up the floor to public comment now. If there's anyone on the call who would like to raise your hand and be recognized by myself, the chair. Seeing no public comment.
Now, I see a hand, Andrew, but maybe it's,
Did you?
oh, no, it's, never mind. I don't see a hand.
Is it your hand?
No.
Okay,
So with that, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the additional dwelling unit zoning bylaw amendment.
okay, so, the board had asked what information we had, for the additional dwelling units, and let me see, I sent everybody, our building inspections division keeps a log since 2021. And then I was able to go back and look at our ZBA log. So since the bylaw amendment was made in 2020, there were 2 special permits issued by the Board of Appeals for ADUs, 5 in 2021, 4 in 2022, 2 in 2023, and 4 so far in 2025. And hang on 1 second, I just gotta find my email. Oh, it's just not my day. I'm sorry. There it is. So I sent the board the chart from the building inspections division.
Was that the one ADU building permit list?
Yep.
Yep.
So I can, because the board had specifically asked about, the square footages. And, so 2021, so the color coding goes, the brownish green color are special permits. The pink is a special permit was required, but not necessarily due to it being over 750 square feet. So the example, 225 Thoreau Street, their ADU is only 435. But it was located above an existing detached garage that needed a setback waiver. The garage was existing at 5 feet from the property line. So an ADU has to meet the setbacks for the principal structure, but you can get a special permit through the Board of Appeals for them to waive a setback requirement. So, in 23, 3 of them, they were below 750 and 1 was above. So this information was provided based on the conversation the board had, whether to have the ADU bylaw be by right up to 900, which is the current law that will go into effect February 2nd, or whether just to make it 1,000 square feet, meaning, these units that have, got a special permit, they have a special permit, they'll continue, even though they're over 900 square feet, they'll be able to continue as, legally conforming by a special permit. So this is the information, they're really, they really are all over, the map based on, square footage, and it's my sense, it's based on, individual property owners, and, most of them are thoughtful in how they want to have an ADU on their property and how it, works with the single family dwelling or other detached structures, or, so that's the information I can provide for the board as far as whether you want it to be by right 900 or by right to 1,000.
Well, I noticed that 5 of them are over 900, which is a substantial proportion. It indicates that there's a desire to go above 900. So that would argue in favor of us making it by
there's-
right up to 1,000.
33% of them, a third of them.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's 1/3. It's not.
It's not the majority, no, but
No.
it's a substantial number in terms of if our goal is to supply modest-sized housing units for people in town as an alternative for large housing units, there's the question of if we allow them to be really large, then we're losing our diversity of housing size. But if a third of people want them to be up to 1,000 or at least over 900 square feet, it indicates a desire, but it's hard to know looking at this, is it that people want as much space as we can have and they'll take anything they can get? Or is it that it really does make a difference to people's quality of life to have the extra 100 square feet available to them? And there's no way to, I don't think we can get a real answer to that question, but if a third of them are over 900 square feet, it really makes me suspect we ought to go up to 1,000 by right.
Now, it would seem, to me that, even 1,000 square feet provides diversity in our housing stock. I don't think there are a lot of new units that are coming onto the market, other than what will be in the 40Bs, that are, homes that are smaller.
They're all going to
than-
be 3,000 square feet or up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
So
five.
I'm not sure that the, we see what the market wants. And I think that it seems reasonable to me and still satisfying some diversity in needs.
It
Yeah.
seems it would make it much easier to have a 2-bedroom ADU if the bedrooms aren't particularly large, and being able to have both 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom ADUs would allow, a young family with a baby or 2 small children to get some diversity there, or a couple looking to downsize where they just want to be able to squeeze in a guest room for when people visit them. Even if it wouldn't be a very big one, 1,000 would be a lot easier to do either of those 2 things than 900 square feet.
I guess the only concern is if you have the 2 bedrooms, then no, never mind. Never mind. I was wrong
Okay,
in
yeah.
what I was thinking. Yeah.
So the only other, town council made a couple of what I would consider, minor edits, to the language. Agreeing with Sue's edit on, the,
New letter G a new letter F that we could simplify it even more.
new letter F, no, the, new letter G and, a transit stop as specified in Mass General Law, Chapter 48,
Oh.
Section 1A, so. So I don't know if the
Yeah.
board wants to individually go through this or whether anybody had any questions about town council's comments.
I did have one question. I thought that we could simplify new letter F a little bit more, but it was really, that's just to run back past town council and say, could we simplify this language, make it a little shorter in this way? I suggest it's not exciting or interesting.
Is that suggestion something you sent me or you?
It is that I sent you, like after 5 o'clock today, so I wouldn't expect you to have seen it yet.
um, 5 o'clock today?
I can go look up exactly when I
No.
sent it.
No. I see one for intent and purposes, and then the other one was the general corrections. I did not see one for ADU.
ADU, I said, oh no, I sent it at 4 o'clock.
Oh, there it is. Okay, 4 o'clock. Sorry, give me a second.
Mm.
So new letter F.
I was thinking, why do we have to say anything about the required setbacks for the primary structure of the applicable zoning district if we're already talking about all requirements for location on the lot applicable to the primary structure in the applicable zoning district per town council's addition? That's all. Because isn't
Okay.
required setback another of the requirements for location on the lot? That's all.
I will
See,
ask.
Great.
Yep.
That was it. Except for, some commas, which are not interesting.
Okay. Right. Then I know, Sue sent emails. I don't know if you want me to bring those up, Sue, and
I don't think so. Those were mostly cases of where I didn't quite follow town council's comment, and therefore I wanted to check whether town council meant this or town council meant that, but there's no point in looking at it in our meeting.
okay. So a few of town council's comments for the two housekeeping bylaws, you agreed with some of the things and then did not agree with some of the other items. Unless somebody has a specific question about some of them, what I'd probably like to do is go through those two items and do it the next draft, I'm going to say clean draft without the comments. Send that to council for a review before your next meeting so that you can be looking at, clean drafts of those two articles, the ADU bylaw. We did find a typo in the sign bylaw. That was a typo that made it through from the warrant all the way through to the AG. And it should have said addition, and it says additional. And the town clerk does not feel that taking, those actually are two different words that have two different meanings. So you're going to see one other housekeeping correction for the sign bylaw. And then I think the other things the board has is I'm just waiting for the final dates for the new, maps for the floodplain for Virginia Road. Waiting for the dates on those maps from FEMA, which I think we're supposed to get by the end of the year. And then the other conversation was amending the site plan rules and regs to allow for 120 days instead of 90 days. Town council did agree that changing the site plan rules and regs to be 90 days from the close of the public hearing. The Attorney General would probably find that runs afoul because it would be too much like a special permit process. And but he did agree that going from 90 days from the date the application is submitted to 120 days would probably be acceptable.
Can I go back to the ADU?
Sure.
Did we decide whether we want 900 or 1,000, or have we not decided? Okay,
I heard two people in favor of going to 1,000.
okay, all right. Just curious. I like the comments that were made in it, you know, excluding the garage and some of the other comments, the thing about, you know, not allowing them to do a tourist home, I think is a good addition to it as well. So,
And are you in favor of 1,000?
me,
Yeah.
I think we're trying to make this easy, and I think if a third of the applications are above 900, that we probably should make it 1,000, just so that we're not reviewing every ADU that comes along. Because I mean, I think that is part of what we're trying to do, is simplify the process, make it easier for people to put in an ADU. But I think we should get everybody's input on that. But
Personally, I tend to favor 1,000 just simply because it'll result in more units being built. I know that the point is to build smaller, more diverse housing options, but with construction costs, I just think that the extra bedroom that this potentially gives you as a matter of right may spur production. Again, the evidence seems to be that most people are building what fits on their lot as opposed to the most they humanly could. I mean, there's evidence obviously that one of them was the most, you don't build 999 square feet by accident, but the rest of them seem to at least, be okay, it's above a garage and it happens to be,
Right.
150 square feet larger. We're going to get a special permit for that, stuff like that. You've obviously got the one or two outliers, but I think it basically shows that people are building what fits, without regard to maximizing. So I would favor just going to 1,000 because you were able to get there anyway. And it just seems like the other rules that we have in town about setbacks and all those things are restrictive enough to keep people from doing anything truly crazy. I don't know if anyone else wanted to comment before we give Elizabeth some marching orders.
okay. Thanks.
Pat, Abby, Rob, any opinion on the matter?
No, I agree. I think there's fine. I think the data shows that we're not. It seems like most of those were kind of adaptations and renovations of like existing structures or over garages and things like that. I think that's, if that's what we're looking at, I don't see a substantial problem with it. I don't think going to 1,000 feet is all of a sudden going to spur, a massive change in how the number of ADUs that we're seeing or anything like that. But I think it's going to simplify the process a bit.
I agree.
You saw if Rob nod his head yes.
No, I'm fine with it. What Abby said is right. We're not going to see dozens of these all of a sudden start popping up.
Right. Okay. All I have on my part, and I think, we're ready. Mark and I can talk about parking.
Sure. Let's see, talk a little bit about parking. We haven't made a lot of progress. We've made some, as I think I told everybody, my initial approach was to talk to constituents, which I've done. You know, the Board of Selectmen, the Economic Vitality Committee, the West Concord Advisory Committee. I've tried to get their input on what they think about parking. The big danger is, you know, our scope on parking is strictly zoning. And everybody wants to talk about parking on a much broader scale. I have to keep bringing people back in to just talking about zoning, okay? The select board has it on their agenda to address parking. The two aspects of parking that they're looking at are one that's on ours, which is the residential segment of it. We've said that's a tier one sort of approach, if you will. We've got the consultant working on that now. We hope to have some information back to you at our meeting on the 29th of October in terms of how we're going to approach that. As I've said a couple of times now, that's the lowest hanging fruit. I think we can make some changes in that. If you looked at the phrasing in that ADU thing we just looked at, they talk about how if the ADU is within a half a mile of public transit, then it doesn't require any parking. I think we can take that and template that into a parking requirement on a broader scale, if you will, okay? You know, we're trying to make it easier for people to have more housing without the cost of the parking associated with it, but without having a big problem in parking. So I think, you know, that residential is going to be the first thing we're going to approach. You know, the concept of having 2 parking spots for every residential unit is 20 years old. That's when people were building a house and they needed to have a 2-car garage or a spot for 2 cars. That isn't the case we're talking about now, particularly in terms of multifamily housing. Okay, so I think that's going to be the lowest hanging fruit to approach that first. We'd like to do something, as I've mentioned before, on joint parking, because I think that's another place that we can perhaps make parking more conducive to what we're trying to accomplish, particularly from a business aspect. Okay, I think some of the other zoning requirements in terms of restaurants and things like that, I think that's going to be very difficult, because when you look at the numbers that you've seen from our consultants in the past, we are probably below where the requirements are for those kind of applications. We also have the problem that, you know, if you look at Concord Center, you know, we have no real parking there. You can't have a restaurant and have parking associated with it because there isn't any room for that. Okay, so, you know, we have some unique situations in both Concord Center and West Concord. Okay, so the timeline we're looking at, as I mentioned, is we hope to bring to you something for the October 29th meeting to sort of, this is what we're talking about in residence. The thing that the board has to decide is how much of this we want to tack on to the 2025 town meeting. Okay, is it worth the effort to try to do some things in parking, or do we have other things going on that are more important? We obviously decided in 2024 that MBTA and some of the other projects we were embarking on took precedent over parking. We'll have to decide if that's the case for 2025 too. Okay, I think we can probably do a fairly simple zoning bylaw change on parking that will at least start people to think about what we need to change in terms of parking requirements. Does that make sense? Anyways, so that's it, sort of where we are. Elizabeth asked me to bring you kind of up to speed on it. We had a meeting with a consultant today. We should have more information on the residential section for you, hopefully some sort of a rough outline of what our proposal is for the meeting of the 29th for you to look at. We hope to have something for the meeting on November 12th on sort of the joint parking concept as well. Those are the 2 areas that we think we have the best chance of getting something accomplished that the town will accept. Okay, does that make sense? That's my story.
The only other, what we're calling tier 1 that the consultant's looking at is just the dimensional requirements
Thank you.
section for parking. And you know, like some of the things I've seen in other communities. And the board has talked about this and talked about this, like with the redevelopment of Paparazzi. You can't have 50 parking spaces all in a row. You have to, break it up with, some type of landscape island. Another dimensional thing I've seen in other communities is that any parking space that's adjacent to a landscape island, they require a little bit extra space on that side. So when you get out of the car, you're not getting out into the landscaping that after a couple of years just ends up being just bark mulch. Some other communities deal with that. So right now, a parking space, 9 by, let's say 9 by 18, and it's just one stripe outlining that. In some communities, the parking space is actually 8 by 19, and it's not a line, it's a little box. So it directs people to kind of like park in the little box, in the parking space, and then you have this little extra space, for people to get in and, in and out, and, keep a little bit more separation between cars and stuff. So, so he's just looking at some of those dimensional requirements. And so that may also be another, just, that tier 1 process.
Thank you. Elizabeth. That's it. Andrew, back to you.
Linda, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I do have my hand up. And
Sorry.
I know Mark has done a lot of outreach to certain constituents, but I was wondering if in this time frame you're thinking of doing sort of a community meeting regarding parking, because I think I'd be concerned if we went through this and then it was the public hearing was the first time people heard about it. I think that
No.
might, okay.
We'll at least reach out to all of the other commissions and committees to see what their input is, okay? We should have time to be able to do that. As you know, the warrant has to be in by like the 15th of February or something like that. What we need first is the planning board's approval to move forward with it. And once we do that, and that we have some rough outline of what the warrant article will look like, then we can go out and we have a couple of months to get the public's input on it before we actually write the warrant article. Does that answer your question, Linda?
It was more having a more general discussion with the community as opposed to going
Yes.
back to committees. 'Cause I
No,
think-
that is, but committees are first and then the general public after that.
Okay.
Yeah, that is part of the plan. Okay.
Thanks.
So if nobody has any other comments, thank you, Mark. I appreciate the effort you're putting in here. It's
Well,
a thankless thankless job when it comes to parking, but hopefully people are receptive to
whatever. It
change.
is what it is.
And I accidentally, my computer freaked out and I closed my agenda, but I guess I don't have it in front of me. Do we have any other items? I'm not sure. My agenda.
Anyone?
Liaison updates is next and then minutes.
Okay, so if anyone has any liaison updates, I will open up the floor to board members. Have anything? I do not.
No.
So I can tell you that the Board of Appeals received an application from 310 Baker Avenue. And so they are not, I haven't completely gone through, reviewed the application. I just came in the other day. But I believe it is going to require a planning board recommendation. So they are not moving forward with building a parking garage. With Welch's moving out. And what was it explained to me was that how that building got laid out and constructed, and it has to do with that space that Welch's was in and not being able to, divide that space in a manner to have different tenants come in who want smaller spaces. I think it's like 12,000 square feet, but I believe the proposal is to remove a section of the existing building and modify the parking area. And additionally, I don't know if everybody's familiar, but if you come into the campus from Baker Ave Extension, the driveway comes down, and then before the little drop-off pickup at 300, Baker Ave, the driveways themselves aren't aligned very well. They're at cross angles, and so I believe the proposal is to address that layout, but remove a portion of the building, create a new accessible entrance on that end of the building, add additional parking. So that's something I believe requires the planning board to make a recommendation to the Board of Appeals. So you'll be seeing that as well.
Great, thank you. And I guess with that, we will move on to our final agenda item, which is the minutes of. They were separately distributed earlier today with 2 planning board members' edits. I don't know if anyone else had any additional comments, but I did not.
Nope.
I move to approve the minutes of June 18th, 2024 as submitted.
And do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Great, and we'll do a roll call vote since we are all remote. In the order that they're showing up on my screen: Mark Giddings,
Yes.
Sue Felsham,
Aye.
Lyndon Miller,
Yes.
Pat Nelson.
Yeah.
Abby Flanagan,
Aye.
Rob Almeida.
Yes.
I am the board member, also a yes, so that is unanimous. And with that, that brings us to the end of our regularly scheduled programming. I guess we need do we just close the meeting? Do we need anything formal at this point?
You can just declare no additional business and adjourn the meeting.
I declare that there is no additional business. Thank you all for coming and have a great evening.